February had a bunch of interesting narrative titles, some hidden gems, the return of an indie icon, and all action titles as always, so the best games begins with a game about digging a hole, which is exactly as advertised, where you are digging a hole in your backyard in search of treasure. This has that familiar gameplay loop of mining or digging games where you gather ore to sell for money to purchase upgrades, to dig faster, carry more, and so on, going viral on social media, but didn't quite stick the landing in my opinion. But it's a short, cheap game that I would recommend based solely on the simplicity of the idea. Big Helmet Heroes is an awesome looking 3D beat-em up in which you play as a knight on a quest to rescue a princess, fighting your way through diverse lands. Interestingly, this has co-op support for just 2 players instead of the more common 4-player co-op in beat-em ups, but is still fully playable solo with good action and gorgeous visuals. There are 4 distinct combat styles to choose from in Warrior, Brute, Rogue, and Monk, each with unique abilities, offering a different combat experience which is enhanced in co-op with the complementary skills and is for fans of the genre. This video is brought to you by Cluckmech Oasis, a roguelite action tower defense title which is one of the best games of 2024, combining strategic planning with dynamic action. You play as one of 5 distinct animal characters, each with their own unique abilities, leading a team of animal heroes against relentless waves of mutant plant enemies, having to protect your mobile base by gathering resources, constructing towers known as Cluckmechs, and activating your abilities and attacks at the right time to survive. This has over 100 Cluckmechs and more than 300 upgrade paths, meaning that there's plenty of options when it comes to strategy as you figure out overpowered combinations to beat the procedurally generated maps, where instead of predetermined lanes as in other tower defense games, the approach here is much more flexible. Since release last year, they added an online co-op mode so you can play with friends, with synergies between the abilities of each character, a mutation mode with custom challenges also playable in online co-op, as well as a DLC titled Assemble Animal Pals, which includes 1 main character in an alligator and 4 animal pals, more Cluckmechs, a brand new area named the Crystal Cavern, more enemies, bosses, achievements, music, and so much more. So if interested, you can buy it on Steam right now via the link in the description below. I was pleasantly surprised to see the success of No Skin as well, a roguelite RPG with a horror theme, even if the vibes of the game itself are less than pleasant. Navigate around a house filled with unsettling secrets, confronting the enigmatic no-skin man lurking within, having a unique art style which mixes photos of the backgrounds with hand-drawn pixel art characters. There are some survival horror elements to this game, especially in terms of puzzles, on top of classic turn-based combat, also having different characters to play as, along with the unlocking of new content with each run, with there certainly being potential in this sub-genre. Up and down the indie game rollercoaster we go with the absolutely adorable Tiny Pasture, the latest in the bottom-of-screen idle game sub-genre, where this time you are tasked with managing a tiny pasture filled with all sorts of adorable animals. You purchase baby animals and nurture them, and as they mature, collect coins they produce in order to fund various upgrades and new purchases, with the animals ranging from rabbits, corgis, cats, capybaras, pandas, and parrots, but also ghosts and zombies for some reason. But nothing too scary here, since it is all in adorable pixel art. The gimmick behind these titles is that it is supposed to reside at the bottom of your screen, giving you something to look at while you work on something else on the computer, but of course can be distracting if you are focused on deep work. But for everything else, you can add a little bit of whimsy to your desktop with games like this. Another title which kind of came out of nowhere is Peripeteia, placing you in an alternate history cyberpunk Poland where you play as a young cybernetic super soldier navigating this post-Soviet city teeming with corruption and opportunities. This is more immersive sim in design, giving you multiple options and ways to tackle a variety of scenarios, also having both first and third person perspectives and mixing gameplay elements from shooters, stealth games, and RPGs. The world is rich with diverse factions, ideologies, and plenty of missions, so it is pretty ambitious but janky in spots, with early access planned to last at least until 2026, so maybe hold off for now, but definitely wishlist the game to keep an eye on this. Border Pioneer is a pixel art city builder defense title where you have to build up your town on the frontier while fending off waves of enemies centered around surviving the horde through strategic construction and placement of defenses and training of your own troops. I do love defense-centered RTS titles like They Are Billions, with the minimalist pixel art here being effective for what it is, with a town building and resource management aspect to contend with, on top of the almost tower defense style element, being a good, if smaller one of these in terms of the amount of content. We also had the release of Jump King Quest, a platforming climbing adventure rage game which is the follow-up to the viral sensation Jump King, where in this sequel, you are once again ascending a vertical world filled with perilous obstacles and enemies. Building upon the original, this introduces combat mechanics, character progression, and online multiplayer alongside the tactical jumps of the original. Set in a location known as The Heights, a sprawling environment inhabited by various creatures, characters, and enemies, this does have plenty of variety, with the multiplayer aspect adding chaos to the mix, since other players can appear to be friendly but might just stab you in the back, causing you to fall a couple of screens down and potentially losing minutes of progress, since there's no traditional game over screen here, but will continue to enrage a new bunch of players. I had Blood Typers on the list of upcoming releases of the month to watch, and I'm happy to report that it does not disappoint. A survival horror title, yes, but one which combines typing mechanics with the more classic intensity of games in this genre. Everything in this game, from movement to combat, is controlled by typing words accurately and swiftly as you make your way through various themed maps based on classic horror movie locations which are infested with zombies and other terrifying monsters in an attempt to escape. It also has co-op support and various difficulty levels to choose from, with the developers releasing a number of patches and updates already for this game, so I wonder if there will be additional content. The latest entry of note in the PvPvE extraction game subgenre is Legacy, Steel and Sorcery, a third-person action RPG set in a high fantasy world that combines real-time responsive combat with extraction-based gameplay, where players battle over precious loot but have to get out of the zone safely if they want to keep it. The extraction game is perceived as the next big thing in gaming following the Battle Royale, so developers and investment money is jumping on that trend, with this being one of the more successful launches, currently sitting at 2,000 plus Steam reviews, with player population peaking at about 700 players 1 month after launch, down from the peak of 3,000, which is to be expected. Combat, crafting and loot systems in this game are good, although the usual balancing changes are to be expected, with some variety in playable character classes, which, to their credit, are distinct, so I'll be very interested to see where this goes from here. Another pleasant surprise for the month is Cabernet, a 2D narrative RPG set in a 19th century Eastern European inspired world with a modern twist. You play as a newly turned vampire, grappling with her newfound existence among unsuspecting townsfolk, placing an emphasis on the role-playing parts of the RPG, since while there isn't traditional combat per se, you can level up your knowledge and skills that befit a young lady, using these to maneuver your way in society. There's a calendar and timetable to manage, other vampires to befriend or be enemy, innocent townsfolk that you can prey upon and more, and stands out in the sea of indie games for being unique, and hey, who doesn't love some vampire fiction? I'm not usually a space shooter person, much preferring the classic gothic dark fantasy setting of the Diablos and Path of Exiles of the world, but I have to say, Reality Break is a great one of these, essentially being an action RPG with loot, leveling, skill points, stats and so on, but where you control a ship and blast away at enemies in space. You play as a mercenary with the power to alter reality, having to confront sinister forces that aim to reshape existence, with the rewrite mechanic being the most interesting part. Almost everything in this game can be affected by this ability, where you can double the timer in a mission, upgrade loot rarity, or even resize the equipment so that it can fit on your ship. There is an opt-in roguelite mode as well, where you are gaining a currency named Reality Points when you reset the timeline, used in the massive permanent metagame talent tree, But if you're sick of roguelites, this is completely optional and you can play through the regular mode, with the developer having additional plans to update the game with more content, but it's pretty good as is. A unique tycoon game is Blood Bar Tycoon, where you play as a vampire bar owner within a darkly humorous setting. You have to construct and oversee bars and blood processing facilities, aiming to serve your vampire clientele effectively, having to run a regular bar on the front end to attract human patrons and then to covertly lure them to the back to harvest their blood, processing that and to then sell it on to your vampire clients instead, while trying to avoid the attention of the authorities and vampire hunters. The dual bar setup is interesting, while still maintaining basic tycoon game mechanics like researching new technology, hiring and managing staff, purchasing and placing furniture and so on, with elder vampires to befriend as well, and despite the theme, does have a sense of humour and is a great one of these. In Microtopia, you are tasked with managing a colony of robotic ants within a simulated ecosystem, developing and expanding intricate networks of transport rails, automating supply chains and expanding your settlement across a variety of environments, each with their own hazards. Your primary objective is to reproduce by creating young queens that will go on to establish new colonies in new areas, perpetuating the cycle, with the automation and construction systems here being different from the more classic factory building games. Gone are the conveyor belts, instead replaced by logic gates, where mastery of these will be required to tackle complex challenges later on in the game. I do like the visual style of this game, resulting in some impressive looking colonies on a massive scale, so if you're a fan of automation games, this is a must get. One of the biggest releases of the month is Urban Myth Dissolution Center, a mystery detective adventure game where you are part of an organization meant to solve a variety of cases involving cursed relics, urban legends, and supernatural occurrences. Our protagonist has clairvoyant abilities and can see the intentions of others and their residual thoughts, being especially helpful when investigating these cases, working under the guidance of the center's director, who is a level S psychic. Of course, I love the pixel art here, with the cases being tied together with a larger narrative, so if you love detective games, this will be your gem. One of you in the comments made it a point to shout out Card Survival Fantasy Forest, so I had to take a look, and I'm glad that I did, answering my own question of whatever happened to the developers of Card Quest, and the answer is that they released a successful card-based survival title named Card Survival Tropical Island back in 2022, and followed that up with this game. This throws you into a primordial forest filled with beasts, spirits, and monsters, where your goal is to survive, with all the interactions in the game involving using or combining cards. There's a complex ecosystem featuring dynamically simulated forces, where your actions will affect animal and plant populations, for example, which is on top of weather, seasons, and more. The simulation aspect of your character is also insanely detailed, not just being limited to simple hunger, thirst, or fatigue meters, but goes into digestive and immune systems, intricate wound and healing processes, as well as mental health aspects such as anxiety, mania, and depression. Physical attributes are also tracked, from body weight to even stool consistency, being a very deep simulation title despite the relatively simple visual style, and is the essence of don't judge a book by its cover. Given the success of games like Balatro, it will be no surprise that developers are looking to take inspiration from other card games and adding a roguelite spin on it, hoping to achieve a similar level of success, and as poker is to Balatro, so is Free Cell to Stray Path. You select from a variety of playable characters and explore randomly generated dungeons, dragging cards around and playing them to clear the board of enemies, obtain loot, get upgrades, and more. Roguelite replayability results in new challenges and opportunities in every run, giving you a fresh experience, and it's a good one of these. A sweet looking game which is pretty much all art style is Stories from Soul the Gun Dog, a visual novel adventure game that pays tribute to retro anime, 1980s science fiction, and classic PC 9800 titles, absolutely nailing it in terms of visuals. You serve as the security officer aboard the Gundog patrol ship sent to investigate mysterious signals on the edge of your territory, where the routine task quickly escalates into a battle for survival against a mysterious assailant. It plays like a classic adventure game where you can move around and explore the various sections of the ship, collecting items, talking to the crew, and solving puzzles to uncover the truth, with a story which is filled with twists and turns and thus have multiple endings based on your choices, and is a must-get for fans of the genre. An impressive roguelite management sim is Keep Driving, one of the most unexpected and out there titles that is so indie games, since you are not on some grand quest to slay the monster and to save the world, but rather are trying to travel across the country to get to the festival on the other side. It is not explicitly mentioned, but given that the developer is located in Sweden and includes tracks from local Swedish indie bands in the game, this is probably some approximation of their experience of life in Sweden and is set in the early 2000s as well, probably reflecting their own experience during that time. The journey is fraught with challenges, including navigating difficult road conditions, managing limited resources like fuel and vehicle durability, and encountering a variety of characters such as hitchhikers with unique stories and quests, with quote-unquote turn-based combat, which kicks in when you need to address various obstacles and hazards on your trip. Again, multiple endings are a feature here, with the road trip style structure inspired by games like Oregon Trail, but less deadly of course, being a cool, weird thing that has to be mentioned. We also had the 1.0 release of Mind Over Magic, a magical academy colony management sim that has you building and upgrading the school, training a band of powerful mages, and to use their power to explore and fight in a mysterious underground dungeon known as the Underschool, located beneath your academy. This title did impress even while in early access, so if you have even the slightest bit of interest in this, now is a great time to pick it up, with extensive building and customization options for the school, as well as a great look and wonderful theme. A significant aspect of the game involves preparing your mages to explore the horrors of the Underschool, where you need to study lost arcana, grow exotic plants, brew potions, raise magical beasts, as well as summon undead servants, among other activities, and is a no-brainer pick. A title that was pretty much a sure bet for the month is Die in the Dungeon, a roguelite dice-building RPG where your deck is not made out of cards but dice instead. This is framed as a turn-based RPG, think Slay the Spire, but with the very unique dice grid where you are slotting the rolled dice into this to boost and enhance each other before confirming your attack. In deck-building fashion, there are various types of dice to collect, combine and upgrade, where finding and exploiting these synergies is the fun of the game, adding the randomness of the dice rolls for added challenge and variation. I absolutely love the art style as well, and it's an awesome early access release, where the reason why I said that this was a sure bet is that the developers, even pre-release, have been running playtests and updating their demo, continually getting feedback from players to tweak and improve, so much so that it had a great launch, with momentum only looking to compound as time goes on. I said that Guns of Fury was pretty much Metal Slug Metroidvania and stand by it, mixing run and gun action with that military theme with an interconnected map, effectively capitalizing on that idea, and is a must-play for fans of the genre. Nothing too crazy here, but great shooting and action, epic boss battles against giant vehicles, and absolutely sick pixel art is the recipe for a good game, where I suppose the complaint would be that the developer didn't do more with the idea to catch the ball and run with it, so to speak. But if you love this genre like me, this is probably worth a go. Another military-themed title, but one which is very different, is the 1.0 release of Door Kickers 2 Task Force North, a real-time tactics game that follows in the footsteps of old-school SWAT or Rainbow Six games, where you command special operations forces within a fictional Middle Eastern nation, taking on missions to combat terrorist organizations. The game emphasizes strategic planning and swift decision-making, during dynamic combat scenarios where you have to plan and execute troop movement to effectively take out the enemy with minimal losses. But inevitably, with the destructible terrain, new information will present itself to you and you need to pause and rethink your strategy on the fly. It is very military themed, so all kinds of firearms and weapon mods are in play, where you use machine guns to lay down suppressive fire while the other team members try to flank the enemy, with grenades, IEDs, suicide bombers and more being in play as well. There are 3 distinct factions to choose from, each offering unique strengths and equipment, with the developers taking the time to get it right in early access, and is one of the most successful releases of the year. What did I tell you? It is difficult to predict how first-person co-op horror titles that follow in the footsteps of Lethal Company would do, since they could be a cheap clone or somehow become the next big thing, which is exactly the case with R.E.P.O. This has that familiar gameplay loop of exploring a dangerous location, fleeing from or fighting monsters as a last resort, while desperately searching for valuable objects to bring back to the home base to sell for upgrades, where you are playing as wacky looking robots with physics as the main gimmick here. For example, objects you want to take are fragile and can break if dropped, along with the usual physics hilarity that ensues when things get chaotic, especially with 6-player co-op. And while in theory a horror game, this can actually be quite funny if you are screwing around with friends, with player population holding up, peaking at 139,000 concurrent players as of recording, and is a massive success. Yes, Sworn is yet another action roguelite title that follows in the footsteps of Hades, only instead of Greek mythology, it draws upon Arthurian legend where you are battling against a corrupted King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. Instead of the Olympic gods, you are calling upon the Fey Lords instead, but like Raven's Watch that came before this, giving just enough of a spin on things can be enough to attract players, which results in a successful game. So mission accomplished, with this being an early access release with plenty of room for expansion. I love the original Crypt of the Necrodancer, a rhythm roguelike RPG that was one of the OG indie games that really blew up in popularity, so much so that the developer was able to work on multiple projects and even spun up a publishing arm, although overextension did result in layoffs, but they are back with Rift of the Necrodancer, a funny way of things coming around full circle, since this is pretty much a traditional rhythm game as compared to the roguelite Dungeon Crawler original, featuring great art and of course awesome music. Despite it only having 3 lanes, it is very challenging since enemies have different movement patterns which you need to memorize and react to. While I do love this genre despite not being very good at it, but it's a fantastic title worth a play. Watch this video for more of the best indie games.